To begin with, we have to know the Uganda we have today. The Uganda we have today is what has been taking place since the 1966 crisis. The 1966 crisis, the late Dr. Obote was president of Uganda, and he had some serious problems within his own party. So he decided to arrest 5 of his most powerful ministers. In effect, Obote captured his own government. Following the capture of his own government, Obote proceeded to capture Buganda. That's what we all call about the attack on the Kabaka Zubiri. And the Kabaka jumped over the Rubiri fence and went into exile, and they died there. That crisis, Obote himself spoke in Parliament and outside of Parliament, particularly on February 22nd, 1966. And Obote declared that he had all the power, and as president of Uganda, he can do anything at will. I call that Obote's legal notice number 1 of 1966. He used the military and the police to arrest the 5 ministers. He used the military to crush Buganda. In effect, Uganda became a captured state in February of 1966. And of course, Obote did away with the Constitution of 1962, which was the consensus of the people of Uganda. The Uganda we have today, Obote captured it. It became a captured state. Idi Amin captured the captured state from Obote. And of course, Idi Amin did whatever he wanted to do, to the extent that nobody could even talk about elections or contesting against him. Until the state of Uganda was captured, mainly by Tanzania, the war that ousted Idi Amin. And then we had the 1980 general election. That election led to the war in Luwero. And as I talk to you, really, I see the scars of people in Luwero who died in the Luwero war floating in front of my eyes. And also I see the scars, the dead bodies, for instance, we had in the 2021 presidential election. The Uganda we have today is an extremely complicated country, and it's not the Uganda we want. What Ugandans have been trying to do, but the wrong way, is to make Uganda better. In 1980, there are people who thought that through elections, we can change Uganda from the Uganda of the regime of murder and terror to a regime of freedom, protection of human lives, self-determination, and democracy. The 1980 election simply took us into a war where we lost a lot of lives. Now, I would like to bring to the attention of the people of Uganda, which is common sense and at the same time philosophical. Albert Einstein said that doing the same thing over and over again and hoping for different results is the definition of insanity. 1980 general elections took us into war. President Museveni, as one of the candidates, said that the votes were stolen. The late Paulo Kawanga Semogerere said the votes were stolen. After that disastrous war, we came back and participated in the 1996 presidential elections and the parliamentary elections. At the end of those elections, the late Paulo Kawanga Semogerere said that his votes were stolen. Victory stolen from him. After that, we went to 2011. Dr. Besigye was candidate in a series of presidential election contests, and at the end of each contest, he said his victory had been stolen. The last election we had, 2021, Bobby Wine, the presidential candidate, said that his victory had been stolen. Rigged elections. And recently, President Museveni himself says that in fact, more than 2 million votes that he got in the 2021 elections were stolen by NOB. Einstein says, when you repeat the same thing again and again, and you are getting the same results, to continue doing the same means that you need some mental help. So I would like to tell my fellow Ugandans, stop the self-deception. Let's face the realities of our country. In a captured state, you cannot have a free and a fair election. If every election we are talking about 2001, 1996, 2011, 2016, 2021, particularly 2021, the opposition tells us their votes were stolen. President Museveni says his votes were stolen. Now let me ask you a question. How many votes were stolen from Museveni in the 1980 presidential election? And if whatever was stolen in 1980 justified the Luwero War, how about the 2 million votes he says were stolen in the 2021 presidential election? If somebody had gone to State House to claim victory in the 2021 presidential election, I assure you, would have had another civil war. Because before, people were killed in Luwero to make sure they remove somebody who has stolen votes in an election. Now, if Museveni sitting in the presidential chair says that 2 million votes were stolen, would he have allowed anybody else to come in and take over that chair? So God helped us that we not end up with another bloody, very bloody experience after the 2021 election. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the question, if you have done the same thing, 1980, 96, 20 what, why should we expect different results this time around? We have to accept that presidential elections cannot sort out the mess we are in Uganda. There is always another way. There is always another way. And it's that other way that we have to find to make sure that we end state capture in Uganda. From our history of elections and the positions being taken by those in power, because Obote killed people, saying, I did not steal votes. So if you say Museveni stole votes this time and he says he did not steal votes, what next? So as Ugandans, we have to find a solution to get out of this situation of killing one another for the presidential chair. One, if there is any chaos after these elections, probably we are going to see the worst bloodshed that one can imagine. Because when there's chaos, chaos is chaos. And with the anger that has been accumulated over the years, we could even end up in a situation that is genocidal. So let's put our hopes aside and say, yes, we have a big problem. Elections have not helped. And future presidential elections will not help either until we have made some fundamental changes in our political system. And those changes include, you must have the military and the police and all other armed forces under civilian rule, but you cannot have democratic elections or democracy in a captured state. Now, on this point, all manifestos are useless. Because as Obote said, he had all the power and he could do anything at will. And if Museveni has inherited that political situation of Milton Obote, President Museveni, as we have him here today, can do almost anything at will. It's extremely sad that in a captured state, Ugandans are like grasshoppers in a bottle, which is firmly closed with the corks. And we, the senene in that bottle, are ever biting each other. However much those grasshoppers bite each other, it will not help them get out of that gun rule bottle. So you talk about manifestos, you talk about promises. All those things really are of no value For instance, I want to give you an example that when Bobi Wine was campaigning in Mityana, October 6, 2025, he said, if I'm elected and the President Museveni surrenders the presidency peacefully, I'll protect him. Like I said in 2013, no individual can guarantee Museveni protection. The protection has to come from the community, the larger community of Uganda, the involvement of all owners of Uganda. An individual cannot. For instance, our history shows that Idi Amin was able to overthrow the elected government of 1962. What if Kyagulanyi is overthrown by the military within a month after swearing in? How will Kyagulanyi protect Yoweri Kaguta Museveni? That's why I'm proposing that in order to make a transition, we need to have a national consensus, credible national consensus, that Museveni leaving State House will not expose him to danger, prison, or even firing squad. We have to appreciate and also acknowledge that the most powerful man in Uganda today, who is the president of Uganda and the commander of the armed forces, has a lot of problems. And he's human. For instance, during the presidential election petition filed by Dr. Kizza Besigye, President Museveni filed an affidavit in court, and he said that they accuse him of being a murderer. And the President Museveni himself gave a few names of people they say that he murdered. The Uganda we have today, if people were to come out with a list of people they say Museveni has murdered, and I'm talking about personally, not government, probably that list would have even 1,000 names. Let me say this to you. I am also on that list of the people that Museveni murdered, because most of you remember, somebody spread it all over here and abroad that Museveni had given me poison, and that when my children took me to a hospital, I went to a hospital where Museveni had a list of people that had to be killed by the hospital, and that when I was taken to the hospital, I was killed. Some people even get tributes for 4 hours. The late Dr. Peter Msoke Gukina. But here, I'm talking to you. Can you imagine if more than 1,000 people are hunting you for murdering people? Who can protect you? It requires all the communities of Uganda as a national consensus, not a political promise in a political campaign. What I'm trying to indicate here, that most of the items in those manifestos are totally unhelpful in a way of getting us out of the fix we are in. We have to do much more than presidential elections. Actually, presidential elections are putting a cart in front of the horse. Horses pull carts. They don't push carts. That's why we have been stuck all this time. The good news I can give to the people of Uganda, President Museveni literally made a plea He said things have not gone well because he inherited a failed state. And when he tries to do this, other things come up. So he admits he has not done as well as maybe he wanted to do. When I say Museveni's plea of a failed state, I actually mean that President Museveni sounded Gwanga Muje, but instead of answering that Gwanga Muje, we are focused only on one thing: our desire to sit in the presidential chair. That's a very bad mistake, and it's very costly to the people of Uganda. What we need are not presidential election results. What we need is collective effort to change the situation that we have been in since 1966. And my proposal to that, in the 1995 Constitution as amended, we have 60 plus indigenous communities. Those indigenous communities, each one of them brings, for example, one lady over 60, one man over 60, a young man under 35 that is a professional, and a young lady under 35 that is a professional. You can have a small group that is credible to start the process of self-liberation. All those presidential candidates you are talking about, and also those over 200 people that went for the forms, they are all grasshoppers in the gun rule bottle. Those grasshoppers cannot in any way help themselves get out of that gun rule bottle. It requires the collective efforts of all Ugandans in order to break that bottle and start the process of self-determination. In other words, actually we are wasting time, because as long as you are grasshoppers in a gun rule bottle, there's not much that you can do for others. But together, we can. That's why I talk about phasing away generals, phasing away gun rule, phasing away state capture. That's what will bring the freedom back that we all want, and then we can choose civilian leaders, particularly starting with a healing president or a healing leader chosen by our elders and young people, not coming from elections, that can start the process of true liberation of our country, regaining our freedom, regaining our rights as citizens of Uganda. You are talking about democracy. You cannot have a democracy in Uganda. The democratic process started in 1962 and was ended in 1966. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I am from Buganda. If the Baganda, and I'm talking about indigenous communities, if the Baganda gave you elders like Godfrey Serunkumalule, for the man over 60. By the way, Godfrey Serunkumalule is 93 years old. If the Baganda gave you Justice Sebutinde, as the Muganda over 60. And then the Baganda chose 2 young people of their best, one a lady under 35 and one a man under 35. Can you bribe those people? But in each indigenous community, they have people as good as Godfrey Ray. In each indigenous community, they have people as good as 17 Day. That's the assembly that can start a process of liberating our country. Because they are not looking for jobs, and certainly they are not looking for food. That's where the solution is. All the problems, the rigging of elections, the buying of votes, incidentally, we have to be very clear. The act of buying votes makes you an enemy of the people of Uganda. And the act of accepting money for a vote, and you vote for that person who has given you money, is a criminal act and against the interests of the people of Uganda. So that situation has come. That's the Uganda we have today because of the conditions, as I said, grasshoppers biting each other when they are imprisoned in that gun rule bottle. The solution is there and can work. I guarantee you that no dictator in Uganda can stand up against a body of elders and young people from the indigenous community of Uganda when you have people of quality, credible, and with moral authority. Because with our politics today, literally none of the politicians has the moral authority. That's why you see the resort to insults and political violence. We have the power, we have the solution, but we cannot continue as if we are insane with the same act as Albert Einstein said. By the way, let me read this, and it's so sad. I read it with a lot of sadness. This is a kind of a philosopher, Hegel, a German philosopher. And he said this about us black people, and I quote, "Africa shows neither change nor development. The black people were capable of neither development nor education as we see them today. So have they been always." The way we are acting in Uganda with these presidential elections and even presidential debates, grasshoppers in the gun rule bottle, debating issues, any normal living thing would be finding a way out of the bottle. But you are in the bottle and you are going all over the country promising roads. Kampala pays most of the taxes and the roads in Kampala are very bad. But you go to Kapchora, promise roads. You go to Kigezi, promise roads. Incidentally, the silent majority, and I'm one of those people we call the silent majority. If I may refer to my name is Musoke. It means rainbow, which means the colors of Uganda are not red and yellow. Uganda is a rainbow. That's why we talk about ethnic diversity. The overwhelming majorities, if I may add, even the yellow people are part of the rainbow. Even the red people are part of the rainbow. Let's pull all our colors back to our humanness as Ugandans, and through a body like I'm proposing, start the process as human beings to make Uganda a better country for everybody.